Hey everyone, ready to roll up our sleeves and get a little greasy? Today we're diving headfirst into the world of auto mechanics. Our guide for this journey is a presentation called Basic Tools and Techniques. And trust me, whether you're a seasoned DIYer or just starting to explore under the hood, this deep dive has something for everyone.
Absolutely. This presentation is about so much more than just recognizing a wrench from a screwdriver. We're going to delve into how to pick the perfect tool for every job, and most importantly, how to think like a true mechanic to tackle any problem that comes your way.
Okay, so let's jump right into those learning objectives. Slide 1 lays it all out, identifying tools, understanding techniques, but then it also emphasizes safety procedures and grasping those complex automotive systems. And of course, it highlights the importance of really sharpening those problem-solving skills.
What's really interesting here is the emphasis on a shift in mindset. It's not just about memorizing steps, it's about truly understanding how things work. It's about developing that intuition that lets you diagnose and fix issues on your own.
So it's more about empowering yourself as a car owner, right?
Precisely. And that empowerment, that confidence, begins with a solid understanding of the tools of the trade. Slide 4 dives into the essentials, but instead of just listing them off, let's consider how a mechanic approaches choosing the right tool.
I think it's a really important point because I'll be the first to admit I've definitely been guilty of grabbing whatever wrench seemed like it might fit.
Oh, we've all been there. But think about it using the wrong wrench. That can lead to stripped bolts, damaged parts, and a whole lot of frustration. Mechanics understand that selecting the right tool is just as crucial as knowing how to use it.
That makes a lot of sense. So when we talk about wrenches, what are those key things to consider?
Well, first off, you've got to identify the type of fastener you're dealing with. Is it a hex bolt, a square nut, or something else entirely? Then you need to consider the size, making sure you have a wrench that fits snugly to avoid rounding off those edges. And finally, you have to think about accessibility. Sometimes you need a shorter wrench for tight spaces, other times you need a longer one for leverage.
It sounds like there's a real strategy involved in tool selection. Almost like choosing the right club for a golf shot, you know?
That's a fantastic analogy. And just like a golfer wouldn't use a putter off the tee, a mechanic knows when to reach for an open-end wrench instead of a box end.
All right, so wrenches, check. What about those other essentials, screwdrivers and pliers? Are there similar things to think about with those?
Absolutely. With screwdrivers, the key is matching the tip to the screw head. You've got your flathead, your Phillips, your Torx, each designed for a specific type of screw. Using the wrong type can damage the head, making it nearly impossible to remove.
Okay, got it. And pliers, those always seem pretty straightforward to me.
Oh, they might seem simple, but pliers come in a surprising variety, each with its own purpose. Slip joint pliers are fantastic for general gripping and twisting. But if you're working in tight spaces or with small components, needle nose pliers are your best friend.
So each type has its specialty. It's like having a team of specialists in your toolbox.
Exactly. And just like a well-coordinated team, your tools need to be organized for maximum efficiency. Think about it. Fumbling through a cluttered toolbox wastes time and can lead to a lot of frustration.
Well, I'll admit, my toolbox is probably closer to a junk drawer than a well-organized system. Any tips on how to get things in order?
I have a system that works really well for me. I group my tools by function, so all the wrenches together, all the screwdrivers together, and so on. Within each group, I arrange them by size so I can quickly find the one I need. I also use drawer dividers and those small organizers to keep everything in its place.
That sounds like a great way to stay organized and avoid those moments where you can't find the tool you need, especially when you're already under the car. But even with the most organized toolbox, things can get a little chaotic when you're actually working on a car, right?
Absolutely. That's why Slide 6 really emphasizes safety, and it goes beyond just wearing your safety glasses and gloves. It's about creating a safe work environment and building habits that minimize risk.
Okay, let's talk about safety. I know it's important, but sometimes it feels like those warnings are geared towards beginners.
That's a common misconception. Even experienced mechanics can have accidents if they become complacent. Remember, you're often working with heavy objects, sharp tools, and potentially hazardous fluids.
That's true. So what are some practical safety tips that even those of us who've been tinkering for a while should keep in mind?
One that people often overlook is properly supporting the vehicle. If you're working under a car that's only supported by a jack, you're putting yourself in a really dangerous situation. Always use jack, stands for that extra layer of security.
That's a good reminder. I've definitely been guilty of just relying on the jack before.
Another important one. Always disconnect the battery before doing any work on the electrical system. It's a simple step that can prevent serious shocks and protect those sensitive components.
It's easy to forget those little details when you're focused on the task at hand.
Exactly. Safety is all about being mindful and developing good habits. It's not just about protecting yourself.
Mm.
It's about making sure you can continue to work on cars for years to come, without any incidents.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a perfect place to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll delve deeper into those automotive systems and talk about how to become a true problem-solving pro under the hood. Welcome back to our auto mechanics deep dive. We've covered the essentials, choosing the right tools, and prioritizing safety.
Now let's get to the heart of what makes a skilled mechanic problem solving.
Yeah, because what good is a toolbox full of shiny tools if you don't know how to actually use them to figure out what's wrong with your car? Let's take a look at slide 7 for a second. This diagram of all the major automotive systems is a bit intimidating, to be honest. Where do you even begin when you're trying to diagnose a problem?
I know, it can seem overwhelming, especially with modern cars being packed with so much technology and electronics. But if you break it down, it really comes down to understanding how these systems all work together and using a logical process of elimination to pinpoint the issue.
Okay, so no magic wands involved, just good old-fashioned detective work.
Exactly. Slide 8 outlines a framework that mechanics use for problem solving, but I think a real-life example might help illustrate it better.
Hmm.
Let's say your car is being stubborn and hesitant to start, especially on those chilly mornings.
Oh, I've been there. It's not a fun feeling. What's the first step?
Observation is always key. Is the engine cranking slowly or not cranking at all? Any warning lights flashing on the dashboard? Are there any unusual noises? Those are the things to pay attention to.
Let's say it's cranking slowly and the battery light is looking a bit dim.
Okay, that's a great starting point. Based on those observations, you might form a hypothesis that the battery is weak and struggling to provide enough juice to start the engine.
Okay, so that's the observation stage. What comes next?
Testing. You could use a voltmeter to check the battery voltage. If it's below a certain level, well, that would support your hypothesis.
But what if the battery voltage checks out? Does that mean we can rule out the battery as the culprit?
Not necessarily. It could indicate a problem with the charging system or even something as simple as a loose connection. This is where gathering more information becomes crucial. You might consult a repair manual or search online for similar cases to see what other people have experienced.
So it really is like being a detective, piecing together clues to solve the mystery.
Exactly. And as you gather more information, you might refine your initial hypothesis or come up with new ones. For example, you might discover that a particular car model is known for having starter motor issues, which could explain that slow cranking.
And once you feel confident in your hypothesis, it's time to come up with a repair plan.
Precisely. Based on your diagnosis, you decide whether to replace the battery, inspect the charging system, or test that starter motor.
And this is where things can get a bit tricky for someone who doesn't have a ton of experience, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. But even if you're not comfortable tackling the repair yourself, understanding the diagnostic process can be incredibly valuable. It empowers you to communicate the problem clearly to a mechanic, so you're not just going in blind.
That's such a good point. I'd much rather walk into a shop feeling informed and confident, not just trusting whatever the mechanic tells me. Speaking of mechanics, slide 9 emphasizes the importance of continuous learning to stay up to date in this field. What are some ways to keep your skills sharp and your knowledge current?
The automotive world is changing so rapidly with new technologies emerging all the time. Online forums and communities are fantastic resources for keeping up with the latest trends, troubleshooting techniques, and even finding DIY repair guides.
And what about formal training? Is that something to consider if you want to stay ahead of the curve?
It really depends on your goals. If you're mostly interested in handling basic maintenance on your own car, online resources might be sufficient. But if you're thinking about a career in auto mechanics, a formal education from a trade school or community college can provide a solid foundation and open doors to more specialized roles.
It's amazing how much the industry has evolved. I remember when cars were primarily mechanical, but now they're practically computers on wheels.
It's true. And that brings us to one of the most revolutionary tools in modern auto repair, the OBD2 scanner.
Oh, I was hoping we'd get to those. They seem almost magical, like they can instantly tell you what's wrong with a car just by plugging in.
They're definitely powerful tools, that's for sure. OBD2 stands for Onboard Diagnostics, and these scanners plug into your car's computer system to read diagnostic trouble codes, or DTCs.
So it's like the car is communicating directly with the mechanic.
Exactly. Each code corresponds to a specific issue, which helps narrow down the problem significantly. For example, a code might indicate a malfunctioning oxygen sensor, a problem with the fuel system, or even something as simple as a loose gas cap.
That sounds incredibly helpful. Can anyone use these scanners, or are they just for professionals?
You can actually buy OBDT scanners for personal use now, and they become pretty affordable. However, it's important to keep in mind that a code is just a starting point, not a definitive solution.
So it's not as simple as plugging in the scanner and getting a magical fix-it answer.
Not quite. Interpreting those codes and using them to guide your troubleshooting still requires knowledge and experience. A code might tell you there's an issue with the air intake system, but it won't pinpoint the exact cause.
I see. So you still need to understand how the systems work together and how to use the information from the scanner to figure out your next steps.
Absolutely. It's like having a conversation with the car, but you need to be fluent in its language to really understand what it's trying to tell you.
That's a great way to put it. It's not about replacing human expertise. It's about using technology to enhance it.
Exactly. The best mechanics out there combine those technical skills with critical thinking and a willingness to adapt to new technologies. It's a constantly evolving field that rewards curiosity and a thirst for knowledge.
We're back for the final stretch of our auto mechanics deep dive. We've covered tools, safety, diagnostics, you name it. But now it's time to put that knowledge to work, right?
Exactly. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about some common car problems. Maybe even inspire a few DIY repairs along the way.
So let's say I want to level up from just checking my tire pressure, graduate to something a bit more hands-on. What kind of beginner-friendly repairs could I tackle in my own garage?
Oh, you've already mastered tire pressure, which is fantastic. Let's take it up a notch. Have you ever considered changing your own oil?
Ooh, oil changes always seemed a bit intimidating. I picture lots of messy oil and specialized tools.
It can seem that way, I get it. But it's honestly more straightforward than you might think. And the satisfaction of knowing you can keep your car running smoothly without needing a mechanic that's priceless.
Okay, you've piqued my interest. What are the basic steps involved?
All right, first things first, you'll need the right tools. A wrench to remove the drain plug, an oil filter wrench, a drain pan for the old oil, and obviously the correct type and amount of new oil and a new oil filter.
Sounds like a trip to the auto parts store is in order.
Definitely. But before you even crawl under the car, make sure it's parked on a level surface and the engine is warm. That'll help the oil drain out more easily.
Got it. Level surface, warm engine, check. What's next?
Safety first, always. Double check that parking brake is engaged and use wheel chocks for extra security. Then you need to locate the oil drain plug underneath the car. It's usually on the bottom of the oil pan.
Okay, found it. Now what?
Carefully position your drain pan under the plug. Then, using your wrench, slowly loosen it. Be prepared for the oil to start flowing out.
Ah, yes, the messy part I was worried about.
It can get a bit messy, so wear some old clothes and definitely some gloves. Once all the oil has drained out, go ahead and replace the drain plug and tighten it snugly. But don't over-tighten it, or you could damage the threads.
Noted. Now, what are the oil filter?
Usually the oil filter is located somewhere near the engine block. You'll use your oil filter wrench to loosen and remove the old one. Before you put on the new filter, make sure to lubricate the gasket with a little bit of fresh oil. That helps to ensure a good seal.
New filter is on. What's next?
Now for the satisfying part. Carefully pour the new oil into the engine through the oil filler cap. Don't forget to check the dipstick to make sure you've added the correct amount. And that's it. You've officially changed your own oil.
Wow, that sounds surprisingly doable. What other maintenance tasks could I try at home?
Replacing air filters is another great one. A clogged air filter can really restrict airflow to the engine, and that can impact performance and fuel efficiency. Luckily, they're usually pretty easy to find and replace.
So if I can handle changing a light bulb, I can probably handle changing an air filter, right?
Exactly. Most air filters are housed in a simple plastic box. You just unclip the latches, take out the old filter, and pop in the new one, make sure it's sitting properly, and then close up the box securely.
Okay, adding them to my list of DIY projects for sure. Any final words of wisdom for those of us who are just starting our DIY mechanic journey?
You know, the most important thing is to start small. Choose projects that match your skill level, and don't be afraid to use resources like repair manuals, online forums, or even YouTube videos for guidance. And remember, there's absolutely no shame in asking for help from a friend who's more experienced or even a trusted mechanic.
That's excellent advice. And I think one of the key takeaways from our deep dive today is that the more you understand about how your car works, the more empowered you become as a car owner.
Couldn't agree more. Whether you're tackling repairs yourself or just feeling more confident when talking to a mechanic, that knowledge is power.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of auto mechanics. Thanks for joining us on this journey. Until next time, happy wrenching, everyone.